Hi everyone, this video is a book review about a book that I found recently a couple of years ago. I found it in a little free library box outside of North Hanley train station. And the title of this book is Ready to Win Over Depression, and it was written by the late Thelma Wells. Now, the reason I selected this book were maybe a couple of reasons. The first reason is I know that it is winter, and sometimes during winter, people get depressed, like they'll have seasonal depression, and it's due to lack of sunlight, lack of vitamin D, all of that. So that's one reason I selected this book. The other reason was it's the holiday season, and sometimes people will be depressed because either they're thinking about the circumstances that happen throughout the year, or they're estranged from people, or the people that they loved have passed away, or they're feeling the financial strain of their life. So they get depressed during the holidays. And other times it's just like general depression just from events happening around the world on a daily basis, being bombarded by social media. So as I was thinking about these things, I noticed this book on my shelf, which was Ready to Win Over Depression. Now, I have had this book, as I've stated, for a couple of years. I've glanced at it, but I never felt the pull to read it because I was just like, it's kind of religious. But for some reason, as I was sitting on the floor, I said, I think it's time to read this book. I just feel like I just need to read it right now. Somebody might need to learn more about, I guess, a moral or a different approach to handling depression. But this book is very special. It was signed by the author, Mrs. Thelma Wells. It says, Blessings, Thelma. So before I get into this book, let me share with you a little bit about the author. So she was known as Mama T. When she was alive, and she encouraged people through seminars and books, including Don't Give In, God Wants You to Win, and Mama T Says, Rise and Shine. Voted 2008 Woman of the Year by the Extraordinary Women Conference, and given the 2009 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Advanced Writers and Speakers Association. She was also the president of Women of God Ministries. Now, I think it's interesting that the month I gravitated towards this book, that was around the 1-year anniversary of her death, because she died in October 2022. I believe she was in Dallas. She's a very popular woman. She was on the 700 Club and other shows. When I went on YouTube to look up videos of her, I thought it was so strange that she sounded exactly how she has sounded in my mind. She spoke exactly as I thought she would speak. She had the personality and upbeatness that I could feel in the book. Now, one disclaimer about this book is if you're not like super religious or anything, you might not like this book. If you're just like, I can't stand hearing about religion, you probably won't like this book because it's super religious. And I'm not saying it to like be offensive or anything, but if you're not religious, it's super, super religious. If you are religious, I guess with like religious like Christianity, I don't know if it's Pentecostal or Baptist or just almost evangelistic Christianity, but that's the tone of this book. But if you don't mind the tone, there is, some good information in here. It's just very religiously Bible based. So I'm just telling you this ahead of time in case you're just like going to get it and you're not like of that belief system. But this book was published in 2010, so it is 13 years old. And a lot of the things, especially about depression in this book and how she describes it, I feel is very relevant for today's society, even though it's 13 years later. So, this book was published by Harvest House Publishing, and she starts the preface off by sharing the story of the woman from the Bible who touched the hem of Christ's garment. She says, "Our journey together. Yes, I've been there." So this is her before the story. "I was in depression for a couple of years. I know what it's like, and I'm often reminded that so many of us have been there as well, or are there for this very moment. In fact, I'm told that more people suffer from depression a day than any other physical or mental affliction. Isn't that something? The number of afflicted is in the millions, and my heart goes out to them and to you, for no doubt you've picked up this book because either you or someone very close to you is battling depression right now. So if you're battling depression, then I think this book might be good for you." Oh, and if I seem very calm in this video, it's like past midnight, so I'm kind of tired, but not too tired to talk to any of you. Down low, which is like, not down low, but like down low, like the woman reaching to touch the hem of Jesus' garment. It says, "This woman wasn't well. Physically, she didn't feel good at all. It's likely that she was also depressed, though I'm not absolutely certain about that. What I know for sure is that she had problems, female problems, for 12 years. As someone who suffered my own female problems, I can understand why she probably preferred to remain anonymous. Can you spell hormonal?" Now, what's interesting about this story is that in real life, I spoke to someone who had this exact same story. It was my friend's mother. She's in her 60s, and she shared with me, she compared her story to the woman that touched the hem of Christ's garment. So she had a similar blood disorder. I don't know how many years she had it, but it was for years. And she would bleed and bleed and bleed, and she would have to carry pads with her to work because she was bleeding through her pads. She always had to be changing her pads because she was bleeding. And she said that according to her story, God healed her because she prayed for it to go away, and it did. In fact, what was crazy was when she went to check her pad, she knew she had been bleeding while she prayed. She knew she had been bleeding, and when she checked it, it had stopped that day. There was no blood, even though she had been bleeding. So miracles still do happen. I personally believe miracles still happen. We just either don't see them or don't hear about them, or sometimes they don't occur in certain places, because our rational minds block the miracle from taking place. We block it with a doubt and our own rational mind. Miracles supersede rationality. They would even supersede science. And I'm just saying that from my personal view. Like, miracles, I personally believe, can supersede science and just logical thinking. So, what makes this woman's story, the woman that touched the hem of Christ's garment, in the society that she lived in, which is so freaking sad to me, is she would have been considered ceremonially unclean according to Leviticus 15:19 through 25. So she technically couldn't touch anybody. She might have been required to announce loudly, "Unclean, unclean." That's what it says in the book. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't researched it, but if that was the case, that's extremely humiliating and sad. As she moved through a crowd of people, so they wouldn't get defiled by her and could avoid her. Because, if she touched them, I guess they'd have to like go through their cleansing process. And it's so very sad. You see, this woman I'm speaking of is introduced to us in the Bible. There are other folks in scriptures who clearly suffered from depression, and while this woman might or might not be one of them, she nevertheless offers a fascinating profile as we consider how to overcome this malady. So, it says in Mark 5:28, "If I touch even the hems of his garments, I will be made well." And that's what she did. Matthew's account says she touched the fringe of his garment. And what's interesting about this story is Christ was surrounded by people. So he was surrounded by a crowd. So everybody was touching him. But when she touched him, he felt his power leave from him. And she felt the power of him going into her. And that's how she got healed. So it was like, based on Christianity, you would call that the anointing of Christ or the power of God. If it was some other belief system, it'd probably be like chi or prana or something, depending on who you ask. If you read the story to whatever belief system you were using. But it was effective enough to completely cure her disease. That's why sometimes people get mad at me when I say I don't think anybody would have listened to Jesus, if he existed or not, if he hadn't done his healing ministry, because he essentially was going against the grain of the time. There, you would read those stories of the Pharisees and the Sadducees arguing with him about the Mosaic law, and he's like, I did not come to overthrow the law, I came to fulfill it, and all of that. But I personally don't think that people would have just followed to listen to his teachings. I don't think he would have had such a big following if he had not had that healing component in his ministry. For real. That's why when you read stories of him going from town to town, people would come in droves and they would bring their sick to him. They would bring their dead to him. And then they would listen to the parables and then they would get fed. So this woman, she didn't come to hear a story. She came for one thing, and that was to be healed. I think even though this book is targeted towards Christians, I think a lot of Christians get depressed because, like, most churches, they don't. It's like you can be depressed in a church. I know this because I went to church for years and years and years, most of the time by force. But then when I got a little bit older, I went to a church. It wasn't like a religious church, but it was like a church. And people will be sad. People will be trying to save face. Take the religion out of it and just go to just regular society. People will still be doing the same thing. They'll be trying to save face at their job. They'll be trying to save face with their family. They'll be trying to save face in their friendships and on their social media platforms. He said, who touched me? So she was healed, and he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Verse 34. Some people, their depression comes from health issues. I know my health issues have made me depressed a lot of the times. My health issues started in 2017. And like, when I say it's been driving me insane since that time, like the fatigue, the teeth breaking, then this like the fluctuating weight, like I'm just like, what is going on? Like, why are my teeth breaking? Why is this happening? Like, and spending all of this money trying to help with my maladies. Some people will lose all of their life savings. They'll lose their house. They'll lose their car. They'll lose their friends, all because of a health issue. They'll be depressed. They might not be able to walk. They might have lost their sight. They might have lost limbs, or they're suffering just from an invisible illness that people don't even believe is real. They'll be suffering on a daily basis, and people can't even see their suffering, and that makes them very, very sad. Or people make jokes about what they're going through. I see why more people are depressed now, especially when it comes to all of these various maladies. It makes you want to just be like, why me, life? Like, why? What did I do? Like, what did I do? It makes you mad. Sometimes when I see people going off or going mad, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, are they ill? Are they sick? Are they not able to do what they were able to do before? People express depression in multiple ways. Sometimes it'll be through crying. Sometimes it'll be through throwing themselves into their job or being a perfectionist. Other times it'll be through like anger. Other times they'll just be silent. It really depends on the person. One example would be like Robin Williams. Everybody's like, oh, Robin Williams, he's great. And then you saw what happened to him. And it shocked everybody. That's why you see all of these celebrities and different things on all of these substances, or they're overdosing on things. It's very, very, very sad. People keep their depressions to themselves because they don't want to be humiliated. So Thelma ties this story into her own story where she was having hormonal issues. But I think, she was going through menopause. And the women in her life and the people in her life were telling her to get a hysterectomy. Get a hysterectomy. Get a hysterectomy. Oh, you'll feel better after your hysterectomy. Now, I have met so many women that have had hysterectomies. And most of them, they're still suffering. I've only met a handful of them that are like, wow, I feel so much better. So I think it's on a person, like a case-by-case basis, how you'll feel. I didn't know what a hysterectomy was until my early 20s, when I was skimming through Sacred Woman. And Queen Afua mentioned hysterectomy. And at that time, I really didn't fully understand it. I was like, what? I don't understand. What does that mean? But as I got older and researching more about the woman's body, I was like, oh, that's what that means. So I just think it's interesting that a lot of people were telling her to get one, because sometimes if you're a black woman or a woman of color, they will be pressuring you to get a hysterectomy. They'll be like, this is the only way you can get feeling relevant. Do it. Do it now. But there are herbs out there that will help, or you won't have to go through that. It save you some money. And I have a couple of, videos on this channel talking about herbs, so you can look through some of them. And if you still have questions about herbs for hormonal balance, I can just write them in the comments if you ask. But yeah, so she decided that she was going to get a hysterectomy, and she got the hysterectomy, and unfortunately, she got an infection, and her incision split open. She could see everything in herself. Her daughter and her husband called 911. I'm surprised she didn't die, but everyone has a purpose. Like, she had to survive this to tell her story. She had to write this book to save somebody's life, possibly. So, she says, she called this a victory over depression story. And I can guess what you're thinking, she writes. What kind of victory over depression story is this? I picked up this book thinking it would lift my spirits, but you're describing something that makes me want to lose my lunch. She says, let me continue. It's true that sometimes we need God, that when we need God most, we feel far away from Him, hurting, alone, forgotten, trampled down by a crowd of problems. Maybe at that point, we've given up on ever feeling close to Him again. Maybe we feel dirty and unfit, covered with worldly dust that robs us of courage and weakens our faith. No wonder we get depressed. This is true. I've worked with customers since I was face to face, since I was 19 years old. I will be 35 next year. I feel I've heard every story. I feel I've seen everything, almost. I feel I can listen to something and it won't shock me. And it's amazing how so many people feel this way about themselves. Like, they'll be like, oh, I did this and I did that and I'm just a terrible person. And I'm just like, nobody is going to remember in 100 years. The people you're worried about are basically going to be leaving the century with you, essentially. Maybe they might live to 120 or a little bit over that, or if they have the right herbs, they could be immortal, but that's a whole nother video. Yeah, that's a whole nother story, the immortality. But other than that, like, it's okay. There's always room for change. People get to certain points where they view themselves as worthless and they start treating themselves like they're worthless and they stop doing things for themselves. So, for example, she mentions in here some of the signs of depression that people will do. One is they'll have fatigue. They'll have changes in thinking, changes in feelings, changes in behavior, changes in physical well-being. So fatigue, they might be too tired. They don't want to get out of bed. The changing in thinking, they might like lose their memories, the short-term memories. They'll be forgetful or they'll have negative thoughts. Their feelings, they'll feel sad for no reason or no reason. They'll have changes in behavior, like they might lose all desire for sexual activity, or on the opposite end, they might just like become very like promiscuous and stuff like that. Or they'll withdraw from people or get, not take care of themselves physically. There's so many videos on YouTube I see of beauticians doing a person's hair who hasn't combed their hair in like 8 months because they're depressed. That's how serious it can get. So the victory story that Thelma got from her situation was now she had time to do things like read her Bible more. She had time to really rest. She had time to pray because all she could do was lay down. All she could do was lay down and think about God and communicate with God. I think I went through this recently, but it wasn't really a health issue. It was just my mind about money changed. I was trying to work on all of these different projects, and like, I'm going to bring money and I'm going to bring money and I got to get this, I got to get that, I got to get this and I got to get that. And somehow I was led to videos, and I mentioned this recently. I was led to videos of people living in little tiny New York apartments, paying like $2,000 for an apartment that was a fraction the size of my apartment. Me, I pay $525 for my apartment. I have my bedroom. My living room is a little bit bigger than my bedroom. My kitchen is about the same size as my bedroom. And then I have my bathroom and I have a closet. And this is all $525 in the state of Missouri. And I'm not about to pay $2,000 for an apartment. I might do it for a down payment of a house. But sometimes people will get depressed because they'll be chasing what they feel they need. And once they get it, they're not happy. So they have to keep going and going and going and going. Watching those people struggle and having to work and do all these things to live in these fractional apartments, like, it made me grateful for the roof I had over my head. I was like, you know what? I don't need a mansion. I still have a roof. What is a mansion? A bigger roof. More rooms. Not that I'm saying I wouldn't want one. I'm just saying if I don't get one, I'm good. As long as I have good, safe shelter. Some people don't have clean water. Some people don't have the ability to make their own money. Some people can't go outside and go for a walk because they're in a war zone. Like, they can't do it. It's unsafe. They're in hiding. Like, when you lose a lot of things, you be grateful for the things that you have. One example I want to share with you of somebody who put all of their soul into the chase was one of my old bosses. I don't know where in the Bible this says this. It says it somewhere, but it was like, he who has will always have. He who doesn't have will never have. So my boss, I don't know where he is. He was my ex-boss. He was always very nice to me, but he had a problem. He was somewhat greedy. He was a philanthropist, but I still think you can be a greedy philanthropist. He was a greedy philanthropist, and he also had like 3 girlfriends. So he was 56 years old. He had 3 girlfriends who all happened to be 21, and all of them were poor, and he wanted to just like cycle them, like control them. He could have easily just put these girls through school, but instead he just wanted to use them for his own carnal nature. And he called himself a Muslim of all things. Okay. So this dude, he was nice to me. He really liked me a lot. But one issue that he had was, it was like he was never satisfied. He wanted the best, the most lucrative of the lucrative. So one day we went to a car park or something, a car dealership. And he's like, you want me to get you that car? And I was like, I don't know. I really don't care. Like, it's just a car. He's like, it's a Mercedes, Queens, or it's a Bentley, Queen. I don't know the difference. I actually don't know the difference. If you showed me a car, I'd be like, what is that? I'm like, it's a car. You're like, oh my God, no, it's a Corvette, Kiara. Like, how am I supposed to know? I don't care. Does it drive? Does it have 4 wheels? Does it have doors? Does it have windows? It's a car. The end. One day, we were in his Mercedes, and he said, I just want a new Mercedes. And I said, why? What's wrong? Is this one broken? He's like, no, it's just too small, and I need one that's bigger. And mind you, he was a small man, so I just was like, okay. So recently, maybe 2-3 months ago, I ran into him at the grocery store, and he had essentially lost all of his money. He was basically wearing rags, almost, or he just looked like he had fallen on to hard times. I don't know where he was living. This man went from like driving Mercedes to like doing deals with people to just... Now I understand why it says, and I don't think it just says this in the Bible, but like in other, overall, in the spiritual world, don't put your treasures and earthly possessions. Like, you can have earthly possessions and be happy with them, be grateful for what you have. But if you have this lust and love for these earthly possessions, they'll never make you happy, because there'll always be an upgrade of something. There'll always be, this is obsolete. There's always going to be something that breaks, and it's going to break your heart because you love it so much. Whereas if you put an investment in your spiritual possessions or your spiritual treasures, you will always be rich. If that makes any sense. In this book, she also quotes, she has a psychologist, Dr. Archibald D. Hart, and he's like a leading Christian psychologist and Dean Emeritus of the School of Psychology at Fuller Theological Seminary. And this is what he wrote, and I'm going to tell you what I think about it. The frantic pace of life, combined with the breakdown of traditional values, is causing many to feel hopeless, uncertain, and disappointed. This stress aggravates the genetic factors that predispose to biological depressions. It also set the stage for an appalling sense of loss, which is the primary cause of psychological depressions. Demoralization is rampant in our modern culture and can turn an even minor setback into a major depression in a body overextended by stress. Many losses in our modern world are tangible and material. More significant, however, in causing psychological depression are such losses as insecurity, uncertainty, rejection, lack of fulfillment in one's vocation, and a general sense of the meaninglessness of life. These are losses that were not as prevalent in earlier times. As a culture, we may well have entered our own emotional Great Depression. So, let me break this down. He talks about the breakdown of traditional values is causing many to feel hopeless, uncertain, and disappointed. I think it really depends on the traditional values they're talking about. I wouldn't agree like all traditional value breakdowns is bad, because some people don't want to get married and they're pressured into getting into marriage, and it makes them depressed because they never wanted to be married in the first place. Same with people like having children. Like, some people just don't want to have children and they're being pressured into having children, and they get depressed when they have them. Or they don't want to go in a certain career field and all of that. I think the traditional values is essentially family and community. People lacking community supersedes all of that. You have parents, single parents raising children by themselves, struggling, but they don't have a community to help them with the child. They don't have a community where the child can just go be free. They could go to this neighbor's house and be safe. They can go to that neighbor's house and be safe. I hear elders in my community talking about like how they used to just go up the street and everybody knew each other. Maybe because everybody was related. Maybe because everybody went to the same school or the same church. I don't know. They were safe. Sobonfu Some mentioned in one of her books about like the children feeling safe, like they could go into almost anybody's house, they're always going to be fed. That's community. Now, you don't know anybody. You don't know who a suspect is. You can't trust anybody. You can't trust anyone around your children. You just don't know. There's this distrust because you don't know these people. You don't know what they're gonna do. Every person, every relationship is a risk. That's where we've come to. And then it says, demoralization is rampant in our modern culture and can turn an even minor setback into a major depression. I don't know what he means really by demoralization. I'm assuming it's just like, since it's a Christian-based book, I'm assuming they're like talking about anything that goes against the belief system of Christianity would be considered demoralization. But when I think of it, it's like being consistently dissatisfied and perpetually running on a hamster wheel. You're never satisfied with the money you have. You're never satisfied with the clothes you have. Your life is controlled by social media, what you're seeing on Instagram, what you're seeing on TikTok, what you're seeing on the radio, flex culture. Nothing wrong with flexing, but I think flex culture is throwing people into a depression. The FOMO, the fear of missing out. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out. I'm not jet setting everywhere. I have to do it. I have to do it because so-and-so did it. And now my life is nothing because I haven't seen nothing and I haven't done anything. And I'm not a hustler. People trying to make you into hustle culture. People trying to make you into a minimalist. People trying to make you into like a stockbroker. Like, it is crazy. Everybody's trying to fit into all of these different labels. You can only fit into so many labels. You're trying to fit into 70 labels in 3 minutes. Like, come on now. That's going to make you overwhelmed. And don't even get me started on, what did it say? Psychological depression such as losses as insecurity and uncertainty, rejection, lack of fulfillment in one's vocation. That's like 3 different subjects right there. You have all these crazy podcasters wanting like an experienced virgin, but not wanting a woman that has a child, but wanting like a video vixen who is also 16 years old. What? Like, relationships have turned upside down. Then the lack of fulfillment in one's vocation, being pressured into a career just because it looks good, or peer pressure into like, you have to go into tech because everybody's going into tech. Like, what if I just want to be a carpenter? Like, what if I just want to mow lawns? What if I just want to be a dog walker or sweet things? Like, what if that's just what I want to do? I don't. Why does everything have to be a hustle? And people in their vocation, I think they get depressed in their jobs because most of these jobs, you never see the fruits of your labor. Like in the past, what is this? In the past, when you had, let's say, manual labor, like you would build a house or you would till the land, you had an end goal. You could see what was happening. You could see your progress and you would get rewarded at the end. Whereas if it's like digital most of the time or intangible, you can't touch it with your hands. It's consistent, it's perpetual, it's 24/7. There's never an end. You never feel like you accomplished something. So that will make you depressed. Every year we're creating something more that makes us depressed, and I feel we just got to simplify our lives. Then it says, looking for peace. Remember those uplifting words Jesus spoke to the woman who touched his garment? As she knelt down before him, he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Luke 8:48. I think he must have said that because she'd been deprived of peace for so long because of her condition. You can be sorrowful, yet still be at peace. You can be weary. You can even be grieving and still experience peace. But depression and experiencing God's peace never seem to go together. And this is all the more tragic because depression very often is not caused by moral failing or any sin against God, yet it keeps us from enjoying His peace. It's like a very heavy cloud cover that blocks the sweet, fresh air of God's peace. I know there are moments or even seasons in life when we tend to lose our connection with God's peace, but that doesn't rule out the higher reality that God wants us to know and enjoy His peace. In fact, He intends for us to live that peace day by day. It says in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." When you're truly at peace, you feel secure. What most often threatens your sense of security in the Lord? Do you recognize any patterns in your life in this regard? One thing I forgot to mention about this book is she has discussion questions and writing sections. So if you like to write or if you like to think and journal, this is a good workbook for you. Wanting what's good. In the depths of situational depression, we long for something good or something better. In fact, if these desires weren't inside us, we wouldn't have anything to be depressed about. So even when you're down, recognize this reality. Remind yourself of this often. We're not always going to be sad. At a certain point, most of us will move on. If we can. I said most of us because not all of us move on, and that's just a fact. But some things we have to grow from because we're forced to. Like even if we want to just lay down and just die, we can't. We have to continue. I noticed this I've known at least 4 mothers whose children were unalived by somebody else. And I've watched them as they turn their pain into something that will bring peace for them and other people. The thing about depression is we think it's forever, and it's not. We think that it's going to be on a daily basis, but it's not. It's not. Sometimes it is, but at a certain point, most of the time, it will go. We will find peace. Let's see. Taking action. My friend Sheila Walsh says, "It's hard for me to describe to you what it's like if you've never suffered from depression. It feels as if a cold winter is settling on your soul. If you feel that cold winter wind howling around you, I want to help you step forward into the warm breezes of springtime. The first thing I encourage you to do is talk to somebody about how you're feeling. Emotionally and mentally, talking about your feelings is a healthy thing for you to do. Everybody needs somebody to confide in. That's right, everybody. I get this a lot with customers at my job. Like, sometimes I'll just be like really, really busy, and I actually don't have the energy I just don't have the energy, but I try so hard to muster up the energy if they really have to talk about something. Because what if I didn't listen to them and something happened to them? Like sometimes they'll be whispering what's going on with them because they're too ashamed to tell somebody else, or they haven't told anybody. I'm the first person they've told. So it's like talking to me, even though I'm not a therapist or a psychologist or licensed in any way, shape, or form. It's like lifting their burden off a little bit. But I think they come to me because the universe knows I have mustered up enough strength to handle whatever story is coming my way. I've heard so many just stories that would have put people in asylums. Like, because it would have put anybody else in a nervous breakdown situation. But what if you don't have somebody to talk to? That's why I think like getting books like this is very helpful. Even if you're not religious, like sometimes just talking to the spirit, just be like, hey, I need help. And it's very powerful. God is usually the last resort for some people. Like that's the last source of power that they'll go to, when it really would be better off if it was the first, because you get probably more peace directly from God than you would any human. That's why when sometimes I go through like biblical stories and it talks about angels, some of them I think might be actual entities, but others I think are just human beings. You know? Like, wow, she's an angel. She helped me with this, or she helped me with that, or he did this and he did that. I had one of my friends tell a story to me. He knew a man, or he knew somebody that knew a man who was a firefighter. And he went into a burning house to save a little boy. Or I don't know if it was a little boy or a little girl, but it was a small child. And the child was dying. He saved the child's life, but the child ended up dying. And the last thing the child said to him was like, looked at him and said, "You're an angel," and smiled and died. So all of us have the potential to be that type of angel in the life. Sometimes we just have to seek them out in our own lives. It might be somebody you know. It might be somebody you don't know. And I know if you try to be like an angel, sometimes you'll find the strength trying to help somebody else, and that's what gets you through your depression. She talks about writing an unsent letter. She also mentions taking of yourself physically and all of these different ways to care for yourself. She also has affirmations to say. So some of the affirmations are, I like myself. Things work out for me. I am healthy. I am blessed. I cherish the gift of life. My future is secure. In my heart and soul, I am forever young. I have all the money I need to do everything God wants me to do. And at a certain point, you take on a new mind. It says Ephesians 4:21 through 24. We discover something unprecedented that can take place in our way of thinking. You were taught in Him, as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. And I think like new mind is just new perspective. And sometimes it is an actual like new mind. Like you have a complete change, or you have a realization that sends your life on a completely different path. I think I had a recent realization when I was, I mentioned this earlier in the video, where at one point I was just worried. I was trying to get this. I was trying to get that. And it wasn't like silly things. It was like, I really need to get a new place, or I really need to get this done. one day I was just like, who cares? And it wasn't throwing in the towel. I literally legitimately did not care anymore. Sometimes as soon as you stop caring about something and giving energy, it'll come to you. That's why it says, he who has will always have. He who doesn't have will never have. Because if you're pining for it, it's never coming. But if you feel like you're like, oh, well, I can always have a penny, you're going to be finding pennies on the ground all day. You just expect it to come. So you have to expect God to work in your life. Exploring your expectations. Let's see. Your perception of reality. I'm sorry if I'm tired. Okay. It also mentions in this chapter about the circles of reality. Think about these two things. Who am I really right now? And who does God want me to be and made me to be? Now, if you were to draw a circle to represent each of these two things, would the circles overlap? If yes, how much? That's a good assignment. The anchor we need. In the scriptures we read about the hope set before us. Hebrews 6:18. But so often we lose sight of it or lose our passion for it. God knows that, for He's well aware of our frailties, our forgetfulness, our humanness. So He did something about it. He gives us a strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope we have in Jesus. How did God make this possible? He gave us through Abraham a vital promise, and He confirmed it by an oath. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by him whom he swore by himself, saying, Surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of His purpose, He guaranteed it with an oath. Sometimes I think we just forget how strong and powerful we are, because what I get from surely I will bless you and multiply you, I just literally see an apple. I think of Johnny Appleseed. I don't know why, but like, you open an apple, that's like 5 apple trees in one apple. Think of all of the millions and millions and millions of apple trees and different trees we could have just from one apple. Because from that one apple, the tree will grow its own tree, and it'll grow its own fruit, and it'll grow its own apple. And we just keep planting and planting. It's never ending. It's essentially immortal. So if an apple can be multiplied in blessings and abundance, why can't we? Why can't we be abundant? We're here, right? We survived that sperm race, okay? Like, we made it. The others, they got reabsorbed and fell to the wayside and stuff, but we just have to expect that we're supposed to be abundant and live a peaceful, happy life. And sometimes that peaceful, happy life is just expressing gratitude. There was something in here where she was talking about exploring your expectations. Expectations can be a funny thing. She said, when you're tempted to be downcast and despondent, here are 3 big clarifying questions to ask. What am I expecting? What am I confident about? What do I mostly desire? I think how I solved some of my sadness is just being grateful for what I had, because I was letting people talk in my ear and make me feel bad for enjoying the simple things in life. Like they wanted me to just like be extreme or be in flex culture, and I'm just not flex culture. That doesn't make me happy. I'll have more, but like I'm satisfied with enough. I'm satisfied that I have food. I'm satisfied that I have skills, you know? Like, what's the difference between, like, if I get a car, it's gonna break down, like, in the future. Unless I keep, like, investing in it and investing and investing, and it's depreciating anyway. So sometimes we put such high expectations for ourselves. When it doesn't match it, we get depressed. Instead of being like, look, we got a gift already. Like the college I ended up going to, that wasn't the college I wanted to go to. I just ended up there. And because I ended up there, I have friends for life. I learned some of my most vital lessons in that college. I've learned some of my most vital lessons by making the stupidest mistakes of my life. And it helped me get a better understanding of how to navigate in this world. So, in the end, I think this book was very good. Even though I'm not super religious, it just reminded me of some of the women from my childhood. Like those church ladies, those old church ladies would be like so certain in their faith and in their facts about life. I miss people like that. It's hard to find just people like that nowadays. You just have to go searching in certain places, but like I miss that vibe. And Mrs. Thelma Wells, she really embodied that. So I'm gonna leave you with this thing at the end, this prayer called God is with you. She says, in closing, I encourage you to seek the Lord in your distress. Remember, He is always with you. He will never leave you. It's a psalm. Psalm 22:14-24. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breasts. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. But you, O Lord, do not be far off. O you my help, come quickly to my aid. Deliver my soul from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the mouth of the lion. You have rescued me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will tell you of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him, glorify him, and stand in awe of him. For he has not despised or abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, and he has not hidden his face from him, but has heard when he cried to him. So yeah, I think this is a good book for those who are going through depression. If they're religious, I think this would be a very good book to give to them as well. I believe it would be a great book to have in a collection if you are over a church or if you are in a religious self-help group. I would recommend this book. And look at some of the videos of Mama T talking on YouTube. She's a very charismatic lady, so joyful and so powerful and sure in her words. So thank you everyone for watching this video, and I hope you have a happy day. Bye bye.